supply and demand. So when examining this unit, we are going to understand key terms like a market. So a market for any good or service is simply an institutional framework that exists for buyers and sellers, that of a good and of a service. It may not be a physical place. A market is simply an arena where buyers and sellers can engage. So a market brings together buyers and sellers, and the prices within this market will coordinate for which buyers will be willing to buy and sellers willing to sell. So we're going to examine the forces and factors that affect demand and supply and how the players in it interact. So demand and supply are models that have been developed, perhaps in an iconic model of economics to help us understand the rational behavior of human beings. So there are different types of markets that we need to understand. So we have market structures that will help us understand the markets that are available. So we have what is called the perfectly competitive market, which is a market structure where products here that are sold are identical. So there are many buyers and sellers, and both buyers and sellers are price takers, implying that none of these actors have a significant influence on the pricing of the commodity. And it's a market structure which has significantly no barriers to entry. Anyone can enter and leave the market whenever they feel like. So the demand curve is a horizontal line where the price is the same as the average revenue. It's also same as the marginal revenue. Then we have a monopoly, which is characterized by one seller and many buyers. And here the seller determines how much to produce and for whom. These make abnormal profits in the short run and are price setters, and they make decisions making elasticity inelastic. So the demand curve is downsloping, and the marginal cost and marginal revenue meet to maximize the profit. So this is the average total cost, and this is the marginal cost function. This is the marginal revenue and the average revenue. So where the marginal revenue meets the marginal cost, that is the profit maximizing point. So this is how the curve looks like for a monopoly. An oligopoly is a rigorous kind of market structure where decisions are interdependent at the kink, and the sellers together will set the price using interdependent decisions. So goods in this market structure are both heterogeneous and homogeneous, and demand is inelastic. There are heavy barriers to entry, and the demand curve has a kink. A monopoly is characterized by heterogeneous goods, which are heavily characterized by product differentiation, where sellers and buyers, sellers have an ability to set a price due to initiatives of product differentiation. So here we assume that the perfectly competitive market is a market where the invisible hand of demand and supply will regulate the prices. So what are the basic decision-making units? We have firms, entrepreneurs, and households. A firm is simply an organization that transforms the resources of inputs into outputs, and firms are primarily influencers of the prices. An entrepreneur is a person who organizes and manages and assumes the risk by taking a business idea, turning it into a successful business. And so we also have households. These are the consuming units in the economy. We have primary and secondary consumers. And when dealing with demand, we're basically looking at the quantity of a good or a service that buyers are willing and able to purchase at a given time. So demand is more than just a want or a desire. It is backed up by ability and the willingness. And thereby, we need to understand that we have two key terms that must not be confused. We have a demand schedule, which is a table that is showing the total quantities of a good or a service that buyers may wish to buy at each time, whereas the demand curve is a graph showing the total quantities of a good or service that buyers wish to buy at a given price. And so we have a law that governs us in this context, the law of demand, which simply states that holding all things equal, when the price of the good falls, the quantity demanded will increase. And when the price of the product rises, the quantity demanded will decrease. So this gives us a flow of the demand schedule, giving it a downward sloping trend. So in other words, the law of demand simply states that there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, or the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Of course, holding all things equal. We use a Greek term which says ceteris paribus. It's actually a Latin word which means all else equal. And so it is a requirement that when analyzing the relationship between price and quantity, we must assume that all other variables are what? Are constant. And so, that being said, since this is simply a model or a representation in the real world, which simplifies our analysis, given the quantity demanded of the number of products and other factors, we'll now look at the factors that affect demand. Among the factors that affect demand, we have the price of the good, the price of related goods such as complements and substitutes, the income, which is denoted by Y, M, or I. We also have tastes and preferences, and time in its context. So these are the factors that affect our demand. The quantity that a buyer is willing and able to buy at a particular time will change due to these variables. Collectively, they give us what we call the demand function. This demand function can be written in terms of the following: Qx, which is the quantity demanded for good X, Fx, which is a function of X in terms of the price of good X, which is Px, and the price of good Y, which is Py, the M, which is the income, and Tx, which is the taste or preferences. Other factors could be advertising, population, weather, etc. And so the demand function simply explains the change in the dependent variable, which here is denoted by Qx caused by the independent variable, these variables that we have just explained that will change over time would include advertising, income, prices of other commodities. So graphically, the demand function is downsloping. It can be a curve like that, can be a curve like that, or a curve like that. This is all a demand because it's downward sloping. Market demand is the demand which is attributed by all the consumers at a given time. It's a horizontal sum of all individual demands for a particular good or service. Market demand is derived from individual demands that thus will contribute to the market demand, which is shown by various commodities. So this is an individual demand of A, individual demand of B. When you combine these two, it therefore gives us what? Our average market demand. So assuming there are only two households, the buyers in market A and the buyers in market B, collectively, when we add this up, 3 plus 4 is 7. 3 plus 6 is 10. So maintaining the same price, we get to have our market demand shown as follows. So the demand schedule, therefore, can be derived given the prices and quantity in plot at quantity of 10 and price of 5, you put your notation here. Quantity of 20, price of 4, we put a notation. Quantity of 30 and 3, we put a notation. Then we have a straight line, which gives us our demand for movies in here. So you can come up with a demand equation from these curves. So there is some math that is also involved in this particular course for you to understand that. So The demand curve is always downsloping because of the inverse relationship that exists between the price and quantity demanded. So this is our inverse demand. All right. So this is why consumers will consume more of the commodity at a lower price. So in other reasons include income and substitution effects. So are there any questions so far? Are there any questions so far? So other determinants that will affect demand, like I said, will be its own price, which will give us price elasticity of demand, income, which will give us income elasticity of demand, which will stream from both a normal or an inferior good, and other related goods, which could be substitute or complementary goods, tests, expectations, the number of buyers, that's the population size. So these are the determinants that affect our demand. So a change in demand versus change in quantity demanded. So what is a change in quantity demanded? A change in quantity demanded is a movement along the demand curve which occurs in response to changes in prices of a product in question, only while other variables are being held constant. Whereas a change in demand is a shift in the entire demand curve. So there's a difference. What is change in quantity demanded? Because of the variations in prices, the movement will change. For instance, you hear that bread has gone up by 1/4, you will change in the number of loaves you'll be buying. Whereas a change in demand brings about an entire shift. For instance, you hear that Shoprite bread has gone up from 20/4 to 40/4. People will shift their demand to buying Pick n Pay bread. So this is different. So a shift will occur if there is a change in one of the dependent variables other than price. For instance, we have change in advertising, change in price of the substitute good, change in income, it will cause a shift. But if there's change in that particular price, it will be a shift, it should be a change in quantity demanded. So you must understand that these are two different principles that you must understand. So if there's a change in the factor of price for a particular good, you're just going to move your quantity demanded the way we were explaining opportunity cost. If the price will go from 4/4 to 5/4, maybe people will demand less. From 10, they'll reduce their quantity to 6. But when you hear that the price of bread from Shoprite has increased, um, um, or you hear the price of bread in Pick n Pay has reduced, people will shift their demand from buying good A at D1, they go to buy another demand at D2. So this is a shift in demand, and this is a movement along the curve. So you must understand what it means by that. All right. So the shift looks like this. Any change in demand which is not attributed to the price will come up or attribute to the shift. The shift can be outwards or inwards. But the movement along between the price of the good will simply cause us to change in the quantity. So this is a movement along the curve. So if there's change in income, preferences, price of other goods, it will lead to a shift from one demand to another demand B. So shifts in demand come about because of changes in the price of a complement or a substitute, or changes in income, changes in preferences, or population potential. So in terms of complements, goods and services always move together. So a complementary good is a good that moves together, e.g. car and fuel, coffee and tea. These have a negative relationship. So the elasticity of complementary goods is always negative. So goods are complements in consumption if the increase in price of one causes a leftward or inward shift of the other. For substitutes are simply goods and services that are used for the same purpose. They are competing goods, for instance, Coke and Pepsi, beef and pork, holding all things constant, rice and potatoes. So substitute goods in consumption have a rightward cause, hence have a positive relationship, which in fact leads to a positive elasticity of demand. So the impact can be shown graphically as follows. So for complements, what will happen is that there will be a shift to the right. So impact, complement, there will be a shift to the left. Substitute, there will be a shift to the right. So this is what happens. So when you're dealing with income, income brings about two types of goods. We have a normal good and an inferior good. A normal good is a good which we demand more of as our income increases. But if our income increases and we demand less of that good, we call that an inferior good. Examples of inferior goods are goods like second-hand clothes. In the event that our income goes up, we demand less of those goods. So that is what we call income effect. So income effect will cause the demand to shift to the left or inwards, whereas normal good will increases will cause a shift to the right. So this is very important graphically to understand that inferior goods, they shift to the left, whereas normal goods shift to the right. Therefore, elasticity of income, if it's positive, it means they are normal goods, and if it's negative, they are inferior goods. Regarding tastes and preferences, we must understand that if preferences shift away from a particular good, the demand will shift downwards. Similarly, if buyers shift their tastes and preferences towards a particular good, the demand will shift to the right. So population, also an increase in population will generally cause an outward increase in demand, whereas the opposite to the left will cause a shrink inward. So expectations also affect demand. So a higher expected price will shift demand to the right, meaning we are expectant of relatively prices going high up. For instance, you hear that fuel at midnight will be increased. People will queue up in thousands just to fill up their tanks because they're expecting an increase in future prices. On the other hand, supply. Supply also is simply this quantity of a product that producers are willing and able to sell at a given price. The supply curve shows the total quantity of goods and services that suppliers or sellers wish to sell at a given price. So supply function presents the behavior of goods and services in a market mathematically expressed as follows. QX in terms of Fx is given by the factors that affect supply, which is the price of that good, price of input, which are the factors that are used. A is technology and the number of sellers in the market. So the laws and regulations may also impose on the factors that affect supply. Taxes and subsidies also affect supply. So supply has its own law, which states that holding all things constant, an increase in the price of a good will directly increase the quantity supplied. So it has a positive relationship. So a decrease in price will also cause a decline in the quantity supplied. So producers are more willing to produce more when the price goes up because, like we have in the case of FRA, sellers are keen to wanting to sell goods that seek higher profits and lower their cost of production. So graphically, supply curve is upsloping. So 550 would 550, 440, 440, 330. So you're seeing how the curve is going up, and the demand curve is given by A minus BQ, whereas the supply curve is given by A plus BQ. So the gradient is given by the letter B. So where we have a negative, we know that is our demand function, and we have a positive, that is our supply function. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
All right. So the shape of the supply reflects the reality of the number of firms that are willing to supply the commodity that increases as the market increases. So it also implies that the amount of goods and services that firms are willing to sell with the rise in price of those goods and services. So quantity supplied is simply the amount of a good that a firm is willing and able to supply at a given price. So quantity supplied is a movement along the supply curve that occurs in response to the changes in price. So the only thing that will allow us to change along is only the price. All things besides the price will cause a shift in the supply curve, like it was with the demand scenario. So when the supply curve shifts to the right, meaning we're increasing in supply, when it shifts to the left, we're decreasing in supply. So market supply is also derived from individual suppliers. So if you have supplier A and supplier B and supplier C, when you combine all these, they'll give us an addition of the market supply. So determinants of supply include the price of that product, the input prices, technology, expectations, number of what? Sellers, and taxes and subsidies. So we end here. Our next class will be on the equilibrium, government interventions, and how to calculate our elasticities. Unless there are any questions, we end here. Thank you so much for your time.